So this is a little gizmo. I stole this idea from someone else. A good woodworker would have thought of it. I'm not a great woodworker. Don't ever be afraid to steal someone else's idea if it'll help you do a better job. So this is just a little hold down clamp. I got a set of these on Amazon. This one's actually, they're a little smaller than I thought they would be. You can get them at a woodworking store on Amazon and different sizes. I just cut this little scrap of wood and you adjust this guy right here so that it's an appropriate height for whatever piece of wood you're working with, and pops up, lifts up the clamp. You just put your piece of wood there and locks into place like that. And I'm just going to use this to give me a little bit of leverage to sand these gussets on my belt sander here. Just to give you a nice, again, my original ribs just weren't great workmanship, and it's just little things like this that'll end up giving you a more professional end result with better craftsmanship. So I've got a huge pile of these to do, and I'll get started. So I can knock some of this off the edge, but it's a good shape. So I'll just start cranking these things out. So this is my nose rib template. I want to cut out a notch here and a notch here. This is 1/4 by 1/4 inch spruce, and this will fit right in here in that top notch, and that will define the curvature of the top of the airfoil. Another piece will be glued into this notch in the bottom corner of the nose rib, and that will define the shape of the bottom of the airfoil. So since these are pretty much straight lines, I don't want to use this 1/8 inch blade on the bandsaw. This is good for cutting tight curves, and in fact it's difficult to get a nice straight cut with it. And this is thick material, so all these teeth, it's got a lot of teeth per inch, don't cut through this material as well as a coarser blade would. I've recently bought a few different blades because this saw was just performing horrendously before. So I bought some new blades to see what would happen. This blade works fantastically, great for cutting curves. It's a Bosch. And then I got a Morse 14 tooth per inch blade, which is also pretty fine, but it's 3/8 of an inch wide, so it's better at cutting straight than it is curves. What I really want, that's a lot of teeth per inch, so it's not going to rip through this material quite as well either. Here's another blade. On that one, it's supposed to cut wood or metal. This is a more expensive, or it's not that one, it's another one that I've got around here. It costs more than the rest of them. Most of these are like $7 to $10, $12. I bought another one that's like 20 bucks, and that's 1/4 inch, so it should be able to do some curves, and it should be great with cutting metal. So once I start building my wing brackets, I'll have a chance to try that out. That'll be interesting to see how it cuts through the aluminum. The wing fittings, all the brackets to put the wings together, I'll get a sheet of aluminum, 2024 aluminum I think, so I'll get a chance to try out those blades and see how a carbide tipped blade on the table saw cuts that sheet. It's aluminum, so it's pretty soft, so that should be okay. And then I've got a a different kind of a gizmo here. For the chop saw, and I can use that to cut smaller pieces that I need to cut square on the chop saw over there. So that'll be interesting, doing all the metal work. But now we're still doing wood. So I think I'll try this blade. It's 3/8 of an inch, and I think 3/8 of an inch is the widest I can go on this tiny little saw. If you have a giant bandsaw, you can get huge blades, like an inch, inch and a half, maybe even wider, for resawing giant pieces of wood and give you a nice straight cut with the smallest kerf possible. The kerf is the gap that the blade leaves when you cut a piece of wood with it. So the table saw would leave a 1/8 inch kerf, because those carbide blades are 1/8 of an inch. If you want to make a cut and waste as little wood possible, meaning have the thinnest kerf possible, it's hard to beat a bandsaw because these blades are so thin. I'm not sure how thick they are. The teeth can be offset, which means the kerf is a little thicker than the blade is. But you get very little waste with a bandsaw cut. So this is 3/8 of an inch, which I think is as wide as this saw will take. So it'll give me a nice straight cut. And this is 6 teeth per inch, which is nice and coarse, so it should tear through this MDF pretty easily. So let's start by unplugging the saw. You should always unplug the saw before, no matter what kind of saw it is, before you change a blade on it. If you're disciplined, you'll do that. Could save your digits. And then I'll show you how easy it is to change out a blade. And so you're really best off using the best blade for the job. So just take out that screw. Loosen the support here, the table support for cutting a wide piece of wood, and these guys right here go in and block this cutaway, so you can't get the blade out without extending the support. Move that little guy, that guy, and it lets this thing swing right open. And there's a lever in back. And there's a cam right here. That cam lowers that wheel, and then this blade just comes right off. Comes right off. Just like that, real easily. Alright, now 6 teeth per inch. Undo the zip ties. And this is always a little bit nerve-wracking. Now, I guess you can't really put this thing on backwards. The teeth should be cutting in a downward direction. And this is a 59.5 inch blade that this saw takes. Get it roughly lined up, and then release this cam. And now I'll start out by just spinning this by hand to get it centered on this top wheel. You want the rear of the blade roughly lined up with the center of the wheel, and there's an adjustment in back you can turn. Oops. I cut my table. And one thing that I should have done before, last time I was using the saw, is move this rear support bearing a little closer to the blade. You don't want these things touching the blade, but if the blade gets moved off center a little bit, you're torquing on it while you're cutting, the blade, the bearing should offer a little bit of support. That's actually pretty close, I think. Put this stuff back together. Tighten that back up, that back up. Vacuum hooked up so you don't make too big a mess of your shop. Let's plug this back in. And there's a little plastic window in the side of the saw here so you can adjust where that blade rides on the top wheel. So you don't have to open the cover. Now this top one, I didn't cut that smoothly. I need to take a little off here. The bottom one is nice and smooth. So I can just smooth that out with some sandpaper and get it ready for the router table. And that new blade cut it super easily. I was applying very little pressure, so it cuts great. That's 6 tooth per inch, 3/8 inch wide blade. I made this super easy. So you can see the 1/4 inch cap strip will fit right in there like that. And I'll glue a 1/16 plywood gusset over the top of that to secure it in there. The glue surface of this onto the piece of plywood would have very, very little strength, even though it's epoxy. So you put a gusset over the top of it and it would hold it in there nice and firmly. And here's the bottom. Like that. So you can see I've got 3 holes here, countersunk. I'll take 3 screws and put a 1/4 inch piece of plywood on the bottom there. Like this. Put 3 screws in here and it'll hold that together. And then I'll put this on my router table and just run it over a bit that has a bearing that will ride on this surface to make this piece of plywood the same shape as the template. And then I'll just have to notch out these corners with a chisel. That'll be step 1. So I'm still making gussets. I've been spending tons of time making these gussets. That's these little 1/8 inch plywood pieces that hold the rib structure together. And something you'll probably want to do is take cardboard, this is heavy poster board, and make templates for certain parts when you build your plane that are a little bit tricky in shape, so you don't waste wood trying to get it right. For example, the gussets that go where the cap strip glues into the nose rib here. It's kind of a fancier gusset. Actually, the plans have that wrong. This 1/4 by 1/4 cap strip is not going to be very strong, just stuck to this plywood. So you don't just want this 1/4 around, you want a bigger piece that covers this entire thing. So I made a template for that out of the poster board and just fiddle with it, and it's easy to cut to get a shape for that. And then I simply traced that template onto the plywood, and I made another one for this one here. It's a little bit different shape. The curve is smaller radius on top than it is on the bottom right here. So I made templates for those. And then back where the rear spar comes through, obviously you need a 1/4 around here, 1/4 around here. So what I did, I just created a bunch more half rounds like I made for all these guys, just using the empty Jello cup. And these looked like they could come from one piece. The angles here looked like they were complementary. So I made a template just tracing over this guy, and then held it up here and cut it about where I thought it should be. And it took a little bit of trimming, but worked out pretty nicely. Then I just took this and just laid it on all these 1/4 rounds and marked them. And so I'll just whack that in half, and then I'll have the two pieces to fit on there. So just wanted to share with you the idea of using cardboard or heavy poster board to make little templates, and it can really help. So then I'll just take this, I made a big pile of these, and I'll just cut right on top of that line on the bandsaw, and then I'll have these two pieces. And after you cut something like this on the bandsaw, it leaves a little bit of a rough edge, just some wood fiber sticking out there. So after I smoothed it over on my belt sander, I just took it in my hand, took it out of my little fixture and took it in my hand and just ran it across the belt real gently just to knock that off the edges. I was using sandpaper and running this over the sandpaper, and it's a lot harder, it takes more time. So just after you sand this curve down a little bit, just knock those edges off to get a nice smooth edge. That way you don't have this rough stuff that can prevent this piece from lying flat down against your 1/4 by 1/4 spruce, and it'll just help you get a better, tighter joint without rough edges to get in the way. So templates. Make stuff out of this easy template material first, and then trace over it and make your piece. I may need a few more later, but I can crank them out pretty quickly if I need them. I've got over 300 of the half rounds. Those are the biggest number by far. Then I've got some quarters, the two different gussets that'll hold on the nose rib, slightly different shaped. And these are quarter rounds, but they're not exactly equal. There's a slight angle between them. You can see this one's a little bit less than 90 degrees. And the other ones are a little more than 90 degrees. So those are all the gussets, probably about 500 pieces. It takes a lot of work, but I think it's good to get all of those done before you start on the ribs. Get all the pieces ready, get prepared, and then the ribs should go together pretty quickly.